Hi guys, welcome back to the Blessed Mess podcast. I'm your host Maria Buskirk, and happy Valentine's Day. Hi, welcome to the Blessed Mess podcast. I'm your host Maria Buskirk. In this podcast, we're going to be tackling the hard-hitting topics of being a Christian teenager or young adult in today's society. So, since I just wrapped on a 2-part mini-series called Heart Check, all about dating and relationships as Christians, I thought I would do the flip side of it, complete opposite, and do a little episode all about all of you who are spending Valentine's Day as a single Pringle, myself included. Nothing wrong with that, but, it can be difficult sometimes, so let's talk about it. I don't regret any decisions that I've ever made to the point where if I were given the opportunity to be like, hey, would you go back and redo this? I would probably not redo any of my decisions, because I feel like everything that I've done has made me the person I am today. And I learned, even in those bad decisions, it helped me learn and helped me become a better person. So with saying that, I just want to say, I do sometimes wonder how much further ahead I would be in my faith walk if I wasn't spending so much time through middle school and high school worried about being single and how to not be single. One thing I just want to say, from looking at it from the other side of that, like going through this long time of this very long season of singleness, craving and wanting a relationship, coming out on the other side of that, I realized that your season of singleness, no matter how long it is, a couple months or years, is very valuable and is very important and shouldn't be wasted. And unfortunately, I can say I did waste a lot of my years being single, focusing on gaining a relationship instead of using it for growth in my life. So, what are some things that I could have been doing to help in that season of singleness, other than just wallowing in the fact that I don't have a relationship? Well, I always think, I wonder how much further I could have gotten in my walk with God. How much I could have grown with God in those seasons. I could have learned more scripture, grown more in my prayer life, and overall just would have been able to thrive solely focused on God and only with God. And I feel like I could have done a lot of different things. Now that I am in this new season of singleness and have realized how important and useful it can be, I'm finally able to see all of the things that I'm now able to do and how I'm able to grow and how much I have grown in this past year of being in this season of singleness again, and how I've healed from past struggles and how I've grown through that and grown very beautifully from that. I think it's such an important time that we can neglect if our mind isn't on the right things. I think as Christians, it's so easy for us to want that relationship and that husband that we hope to find, but in my last little mini series I talked about how we can get to that point, but until you find that person for you that God has placed in your life for you, enjoy what God is placing in your life on the daily. There's so many things other than just a husband or a wife that God is trying to place into your life to help you grow that we just kind of skirt on by. Like, we just kind of don't even notice. Wake up every day and say, thank you, God, for letting me wake up another day. Wake up every day with a purpose and a reason to be waking up every day. And I like to set little goals for myself too. So maybe wake up every morning and be like, I'm gonna clean my room today. I'm gonna wake up and get all my assignments done today. I'm gonna wake up and do really good at work today. Something. Just look forward to something so that you're not laser focused on your husband coming into your life or your wife coming into your life and your worry just being so set on that. Focus on what God is providing for you in your life right now and be thankful for that. Wake up every day and thank God that you're able to learn more about him. I'm going to be reading from Matthew 22:34-39. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. So I was reading this and I just kept repeating myself, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. That's the first and greatest commandment. One thing I encourage for you when you're in this season where you might be struggling with feeling ready for a relationship and you feel ready for God to place that person in your life, I like to read this in a way of almost using it as a checklist, I guess. Do I love God with all my heart and all my soul and all my mind? And if you don't, take a pause. Take a pause. Don't give all of your love to someone when you're not even giving it all to God. Until you can fully give your all to God, you can't be giving it to somebody else. That's just my personal thing. So I think you need to, if you're in that place where you're not 100% sure if you're just really giving it all to God, take this season of singleness that you might be in and just work on giving it all to God before you give it all to somebody else. Give your all to God, and then he will give his all to you. He will give you the most beautiful will that he has for your life in his perfect timing. But just strive after him, and he will provide. I think it's very easy once we plant that seed in our mind that we want a relationship and we keep feeding into that. It's easy for us to spiral and crave it more, and almost it can even become like an idol for you. You can start to idolize it, that relationship that you want so badly. So how can we avoid that? When we are at risk of spiraling and craving and idolizing this relationship, what can we do to say, whoa, let's slow down, rethink this, I'm getting ahead of myself, let's slow down on this one. One of my number one things that I think helped me on my walk with this kind of struggle was not romanticizing everything. I think it's so easy, especially girls out there, we watch a rom-com and suddenly we want this exact plot of a movie for our life. My favorite rom-com of all time. If you know me well, you know this is my favorite rom-com. One of my favorite movies of all time. 10 Things I Hate About You, where they like the girl in the story isn't allowed to date. Her dad's like super strict, and then her sister just doesn't want to date at all. And so the girl who wants to date like works with another guy who wants to date her into setting up the sister with a guy who is kind of perfect for her, but like she just doesn't really want to date anyway. And so they kind of like set her up on this date, this relationship or whatever, and she falls in love with this guy, and she went from hating him to loving him. So like it's just such a cute movie, and I love the plot, and I think it's so funny, and it's just a great movie. But we suddenly watch a rom-com and we're like, I want that. Like, where's my husband? God, where's my husband? So I think it's so easy to watch these movies and see how cute and romanticized everything is in those movies, and like the meet cutes that happen and everything. And suddenly we want that in our life. It's so easy to crave that, to want that, because it's adorable and it seems amazing, like the perfect kind of situation for our life. But romanticizing can lead to unrealistic expectations really easily. Like, these plots in movies are plots in movies for a reason. It's because it's not something that just typically happens on a day-to-day basis. Like, these men are written by women, and they're the most perfect men, and somehow they just understand women so well. So obviously we want that because they know what they're doing, but it's romanticized for a reason. It's not real. So we get these unrealistic expectations where we watch these movies, we read these books, and suddenly this should be happening in real life, but it doesn't. So it causes our expectations to be a lot higher than what they can be. And I think it's also really easy to see something in a movie, read it in a book, and you want it in your life with anybody in your life. Like, you see these meet cutes, or even like enemies to lovers, or friends to lovers, or whatever, you know, those kind of genres in books or whatever. I think we start to place it in our life. And for me personally, I've noticed this now on the other side, that I was romanticizing so much in my life that if at any point I was starting to become friends with any guys in my life, and they were simply like just friends, I started to romanticize it in a way where I was like, I had some kind of like, I'd built some kind of connection with them on a friend level. I just romanticized it so much to the fact where I started to develop feelings or like a crush on them. And every time pretty much it led to some kind of awkwardness in that friendship, or if they didn't realize that that's what was going on, like that's the kind of feelings I was having, because I didn't really make it known a lot of the time. It just left me feeling hurt every time. And those feelings were never like validated and reciprocated. So it just led to like a bad experience every single time with me like romanticizing it and wanting it, and nothing ever happening from it. It took me a long time, but I finally realized that I shouldn't be romanticizing everything, because yes, it can feel good if you're like, oh, like daydreaming in math class about Timothy over here, who's your best friend, and suddenly like your brain just kind of makes you think of these cute scenarios in your head, but none of it's real. So don't romanticize everything that doesn't need to be, that shouldn't be. You know, you're allowed to have those friendships and build these great connections with people without it being any more than friends. You can even romanticize a relationship without it being a specific person. So you could think like you could be like standing around like right before, like on New Year's or something, and be like, oh, if only I had a boyfriend for New Year's, it would be so sweet and romantic and whatever. And the list could go on. Or for Christmas or Valentine's Day, you name it. Oh, I wish I had a boyfriend because this would be so much better if I had a boyfriend here. I wish I had a girlfriend because this would just be like a perfect moment this would be a perfect event to take them, or whatever. If you said things like this before, don't even worry about it, because I have as well, so I'm not judging you for it because I've been here. I've said some things very quite similar to myself, so no judge. It took me a long time, but I was finally able to realize that even though I don't have a significant other right now, I know that the Lord will provide. God will provide when His timing is right. So even though I'm in this season of singleness right now, I just trust that God has a person for me and will present that person in the right time. And I think that's another thing we have to highlight when we're craving or we're wanting or we're idolizing a relationship, that if it's not in this time, just trust that that's for a reason and that God will provide in His perfect timing. And this is one thing that I fully believe, that if God has placed that desire on your heart, He will have a plan that will provide for you. And even if He doesn't, we still need to just trust in Him and His plan for you. If you guys have read Daniel, there's a story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Basically, King Nebuchadnezzar had this giant statue that he wanted everybody to bow down to. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were like, heck no, we're not doing this. We're not worshiping your statue or any of your false gods. We're not doing that. And so King Nebuchadnezzar threatened to throw all three of them into a fire, a big furnace. And they had so much faith in God here, and it's truly one of my favorite stories. But I'm going to read a little passage from Daniel. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and He will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if He does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Daniel 3:17-18. So here they're saying, I fully trust that if you throw us into this furnace, that God will provide and He will deliver us from it, and that we will not burn in this furnace. God will save us. And they're saying that even if God doesn't save us from this furnace and we burn, they'll still burn for God. They're not going to be worshiping these gods or this statue. That they would die for the Lord because they don't want to worship these false gods. So if we place that into what we're talking about with trusting in God and that He will provide, I fully trust that God will eventually place that person in my life at the right time. But even if He doesn't, I still trust that His plan is beautiful for me. Which that brings me to another point. Don't use God as your ATM. Don't only go to Him to get Him to answer your prayers. Don't seek Him just to get what you want. Don't go to God just to be like, hey God, I know I've been talking to you recently about, my husband, and Lord, if you could just speed up that process a little bit, I'm really ready to get married. Let's get on with it. Having God in your day-to-day life for everything, having God in your life for every aspect of your life is something you can't miss. So don't just use God to get Him to answer to your wants and what you think you might need. Invite Him into every part of your life and trust in Him in his perfect plan instead of whatever you want him to do. Because what we want and what we actually need and what God knows we actually need are two completely different things. And just, again, trust in his timing. He has such a wonderful, beautiful plan for you, so much better than the plan that you might have set up in your mind for yourself or that you want for yourself. His is the most perfect plan with the most perfect timing. So just trust in that. Even in this season of singleness, just trust that even though it can be hard sometimes, like, God's still with you through it all, and he's providing for you every day. And one more thing that I just really want to touch on, and I'm not going to talk too much into this because I feel like I could branch off into this one a lot more, and this might be a future topic on here, but just because you might feel a certain way, just because you might have feelings in your heart for a person, or you might feel that you're ready for a relationship, it might not be what's actually happening. So you might feel a certain way, but feelings aren't always true. So just remember that too. You might feel like you want a relationship and that you need a relationship, but they're not always true feelings. Feelings aren't reliable all the time. But yeah, my hope and prayer for everybody out there who is spending tonight, hanging out with friends or just not with a significant other, and just in this day as a single Pringle, like, I feel for you and I understand where you're at right now. And it can be hard, especially on days like this, to be single. It's all thrown in your face and you're like, but just know that, like, God's so there with you through this struggle, through this pain, through this season of waiting, and through this, and in the season of waiting, it doesn't have to be wasted. So even though you're waiting, how are you using that time in your waiting season? Even though you're waiting doesn't mean you have to be wasting. The time's gonna pass no matter what, so use this time in your season of singleness for good. Grow with God this season. Learn new things. Grow spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, physically. Just don't use it as a waste. Use it for some good in your life and to just grow. That's all that I recommend for you guys. And even though, like, the waiting process can be a lot, just know that God's there with you through it all, and he's so excited to provide for you every day, and he will provide. If that desire is placed on your heart, he will provide. Just trust in him no matter what, if he does or if he doesn't, because just know, like, his plan is so much greater than ours. I love you guys so much. Just know that God loves you, even if it's a tough day for you. And I will see you guys next week for a new episode. Bye, guys.